Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt like an imposter? You look around and see colleagues, friends, or even strangers who seem to possess a secret map of the world. They move with a quiet certainty. They speak without second-guessing themselves. They look comfortable. And you? You are there too. You are smiling, nodding, and playing your part perfectly. But underneath the surface, there is a quiet, persistent whisper. I am not enough. I am behind. Everyone else has figured it out, and I am just pretending. Over a century ago, a Viennese psychologist named Alfred Adler looked into the eyes of people feeling exactly this way. He didn't call it a disorder. He didn't call it a weakness. He called it the beginning of everything human. Welcome back to PatternNotes. Take a deep breath. You're here now. Tonight, we are diving deep into Chapter 3 of Alfred Adler's masterpiece, What Life Should Mean to You. We are talking about the feelings of inferiority and superiority, and why the very thing you try to hide might be the engine of your destiny. Part 1. We are all born unfinished. Adler begins this chapter with a radical, almost jarring idea. He says, every human being arrives in this world in a state of inferiority. Not some of us. Not the unlucky ones. All of us. Think about the biological reality of being human. A foal, a baby horse, can stand and walk within hours of birth. A turtle hatchling finds the ocean on its own. But a human baby? We are the most helpless creatures on Earth. We cannot feed ourselves, move ourselves, or even hold up our own heads. We enter the world in a state of total dependency. Adler calls this the original inferiority. It is a biological fact written into our DNA. We are born unfinished. On a deep, subconscious level, the infant realizes, I am small and the world is large. I am weak and they are strong. But here is where Adler parts ways with the pessimistic thinkers of his time. He doesn't see this helplessness as a tragedy. He sees it as the engine of striving. Because the moment a child feels this gap, the gap between who they are and what they need to be, the mind begins to reach. Adler writes that the entire arc of human development, every skill you've ever learned, every language you speak, every ambition you carry, is a direct answer to that original feeling of being not enough. You didn't learn to walk because walking was fun. You learned to walk because crawling felt like a limitation. You learned to speak because silence felt like powerlessness. Your inferiority is not a sign that something went wrong. It is the very mechanism that has been driving you forward since the first day you opened your eyes. Ask yourself, what was the first thing you ever felt behind in? Was it a sport? A social circle? Look at that memory not as a scar, but as the moment your engine started. Part 2. The feeling versus the complex. As we grow, this feeling doesn't vanish. It shapeshifts. Adler makes a crucial distinction that most people miss today. He separates the feeling of inferiority from the inferiority complex. This is the most important part of the chapter. A feeling of inferiority is normal. In fact, it's healthy. It is the quiet recognition of a gap. I am not as good at this craft as I want to be, or I haven't reached the financial stability I desire. This feeling is a tension, like a stretched rubber band. It creates the energy needed to snap forward. Adler believed that without this tension, there would be no progress, no art, no civilization. But then, there is the inferiority complex. A complex happens when that feeling stops being a message and starts being an identity. It's the moment the rubber band doesn't snap forward, it just breaks. Adler defines the complex as a state where a person is so overwhelmed by their sense of inadequacy that they stop trying to solve the problem. Instead, they use their inferiority as an excuse. When "I am not good at this yet" becomes "I am fundamentally flawed." When "I failed at this task" becomes "I am a failure as a human being." Adler observed that people with an inferiority complex often become stuck. They stop moving toward a goal and start moving toward a defense. They spend all their energy making sure no one sees the gap, rather than doing the work to close it. Think about your own life. Where do you have a feeling that motivates you? And where do you have a complex that paralyzes you? The difference is whether you believe the gap can be crossed. Part 3. The two roads of striving. So how do we handle this weight? Adler says there are two roads. Road 1. Striving on the useful side of life. This is the road of genuine growth. When a person feels inadequate, they respond by developing competence. They don't try to be better than others, they try to be better for others. Adler introduces the concept of social interest. He argues that true healing from inferiority comes when we orient ourselves toward contribution. When you focus on how your work, your art, or your presence can help your community, the ego pain of inferiority begins to fade. Why? Because you are no longer the protagonist of a tragedy. You are a participant in a shared human story. Road 2. The useless side of life. This is what Adler calls the striving for superiority. It sounds positive, but it's a trap. This is the person who tries to solve their inferiority by putting others down. The bully. The person who needs to be the loudest in the room. The perfectionist who is never satisfied. The person who constantly complains about their bad luck to get attention. All of these are shortcuts to superiority. They are attempts to feel important without actually becoming capable. Adler writes with such compassion here. He says these aren't bad people. They are terrified people. They are people who have decided that the mountain is too high to climb, so they try to build a tiny hill and pretend they are at the summit. Part 4. The seeds of the complex. Adler explores why some of us take the road of growth while others get stuck in the complex. He looks at 3 types of children who are most at risk. 1. The child with physical disadvantages. Adler himself was this child. He had rickets, nearly died of pneumonia, and was always the small one. He knew that a body that feels like a prison can create a deep sense of less than, but he also knew it could lead to an incredible drive to compensate. 2. The neglected child. This child grows up thinking the world is a cold, hostile place. They feel inferior because they feel invisible. Their complex often manifests as a total lack of trust in others. 3. The pampered child. This is Adler's most surprising insight. The child who is given everything, who is protected from every struggle, grows up with a hidden, terrifying inferiority. Why? Because they never learned that they could handle difficulty. They enter adulthood terrified of the ordinary because they've never built the muscles of resilience. If you identify with any of these, Adler wants you to know, your past is not your destiny, it is simply the material you were given to work with. The question isn't what happened to you, but what meaning you give to what happened. Part 5. The Antidote. As we reach the end of Chapter 3, Adler leaves us with a simple, almost disarming solution. He says the cure for the inferiority complex is not self-confidence in the way we think of it today. It's not looking in the mirror and saying, "I am great." The cure is connection. The inferiority complex is a form of isolation. It is the belief that you are uniquely, privately broken. Adler's antidote is to turn your gaze outward. Ask yourself, how can I be useful today? When you focus on contribution, whether it's doing your job with care, helping a friend, or creating something that adds value, the I shrinks and the we grows. And in the we, the pain of inferiority cannot survive. Adler writes, "It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in life." Healing isn't about becoming superior. It's about realizing that you belong. You are an unfinished piece of a grand, collective puzzle. Your not enoughness is simply the space where other people are meant to fit in. Tonight, we read about the feeling that lives underneath almost everything we do. Don't try to kill your inferiority. Listen to it. It is the voice of your potential, speaking the only language it knows. The question is not whether you feel behind. The question is, what will you build with that feeling? Small patterns. Quietly noticed. Thank you for reading with me tonight. Take gentle care of yourself until next time.